We continue on our journey through Lent as we step inside the story of a teacher who turned the world upside down. We put ourselves in the picture of Holy Week so that we might take a closer look and let the ancient story open us to deeper conviction for the call to follow the teacher, Jesus.
Enter the story. Enter the place you belong, not just looking on, for this is your story. Enter the story. Story. Enter the place you belong, not just looking on, for this is your story. Enter the story.
That last week, Jesus doesn't lay low. He puts himself out there, susceptible to those who want to trap him, twist his words, get him to say something damning. He cannot turn from his vocation. He's not only a master teacher, but also a prophet and voice of the divine. It is his ability to draw the people to his teachings that pose a threat to the authorities. We place ourselves in the crowd this week to be moved and motivated by Jesus for our lives, to get a faithful perspective. What would we have seen, heard, and felt? What do we do now?
We come here to encounter the teachings of Jesus. Many wanted to destroy him for these teachings, and sometimes we too find that his words challenge us, calling us to more than we think we can be or do. Forgive us, O God. Let us be shaped into a new people, made in the mold of justice, not the stamp of Caesar's coin. You entered our story through Jesus. Now help us to enter fully into the story of your kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Amen.
Know this. There are people's lives who have been changed completely by this story of love and passion. Transformation is possible. You are forgiven and freed, encouraged and loved by a God who wants you to live fully. Let us enter the passion of Christ.
Being tested was nothing new for Jesus. During his ministry, he was faced time and time again with situations in which he was asked to defend his teachings against, quote, the way we've always done it. Indeed, his entire ministry was preceded by temptation. Just after John baptized him, he was led into the wilderness journey and was tempted to use his status as God's son for ends not becoming of a humble servant. No wonder Jesus could recognize deceit in the Pharisees' spies and Herodians' questions in Jerusalem that last week. He had experienced it before in the form of evil incarnate. From Matthew 4, 1 through 11, then the Spirit led Jesus up into the wilderness so that the devil might tempt him. After Jesus had fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, he was starving. The tempter came to him and said, "Since you are God's son, command these stones to become bread." Jesus replied, "It is written, people do not live only by bread, but by every word spoken by God." After that, the devil brought him to the holy city and stood him at the highest point of the temple. He said to him, "Since you are God's son, throw yourself down, for it is written, I will command my angels concerning you, and they will take you up in their hands, so that you won't hit your foot on a stone." Jesus replied, "Again, it is written, do not test the Lord your God." Then the devil brought him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. He said, "I'll give you all of these if you bow down and worship me." Jesus responded, "Go away, Satan, because it is written, you will worship the Lord your God and serve only him." The devil left him, and angels came and took care of him.
Yeah.
Jesus kept showing up at the temple that week, even after the skirmish in the temple market. You'd think he would back off, lay low, stay out of the way. His name was on the watch list for sure, had been for some time. I hear that even when he was born, he was perceived as a threat. That's what I hear. Before my time here, though. My allegiance is to Herod, and I've been placed here to help oversee the Jews this week. This Passover party here in the city makes me so nervous. The place is packed. We were instructed to see if we could get this Jesus to say something that would prove he means harm to the state, or that he will encourage people to disobey the Roman law, or that he will create a rebellion that will get ugly. So we were instructed to catch this guy saying something we could charge him with. They teamed us up with some Pharisees, Jewish priests that oversee the rules for their own people. These particular priests are no more than spies, I would say. They want him shut down as much as Herod does, but they lay it on thick, I tell you, cozying up, telling him that he's such an amazing teacher. I decided to stay out of the way. It actually makes my stomach turn, all this deceitful stuff. I'm sure this guy will go off the rails and end up in prison, or worse. I just hope it's over quick. What? What did he just say? Well, this is something. He's got the Pharisees reaching into their pockets to get a denarius. Ha! Well, I'll be. This guy is good. Nothing wrong with that answer. They won't be able to get him today. Actually, I'd have to say I'm curious. There's something about him. I wouldn't mind hearing more. Perhaps I'll volunteer to keep an eye on him, although what I really want to do is just be around him and hear what else he has to say. There's something about him. From Matthew 22, verses 15 through 22, NIV. Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. "Teacher," they said, "we know you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax." They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, "Whose portrait is this, and whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. He then said to them, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, so they left him and went away.
My dad enjoyed collecting stamps and coins, and throughout the years, I would sit with him and enjoy hearing stories about where he started, where he found certain things, stories behind stamps that he had found or received in the mail, as well as coins that he had collected throughout the years. Those days are long gone now that he is in retirement, but it was a fascinating thing to look at a coin and identify whether it was minted in Philadelphia or Denver, whether it was a rare coin or whether it was just kind of a regular everyday coin. And through those times, it was fascinating to just see how coins changed throughout the years. Whether it's silver dollars or half dollars that went from let's say a Liberty head to a Kennedy, quarters and the state on the back of each quarter as we celebrated anniversaries and history here in the United States. I am drawn to those memories and today's story about this coin. So Jesus, we've walked along with Jesus throughout this Lenten period. We are only in chapter 22 of Matthew. We started in chapter 21 with Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. And here we are just a chapter past that, and we've already seen Jesus in the temple. We have now kind of skipped a few of the parables that Jesus has shared. But following these parables, now here in Matthew 22, starting at verse 15, Jesus is questioned by the Pharisees and Herodians. Now, this is kind of a modern-day tale that continues for us. The Pharisees were religious leaders, the Herodians were political leaders, and they're usually at odds with each other. And so it's unusual for them to come together, but in this case, trying to trap Jesus, they did. They come with this simple question. What about paying taxes? They're trying to trap Jesus, trying to come up with some way to force the issue as far as what he's doing. So they figure there's going to get some response. Either it's going to be in favor of what the Pharisees want or in favor of what the Herodians want. But instead he asks for a coin. Give me a coin. And so they hand him a denarius, which in this case, this coin is a 1 day's wage for a laborer. You think about they're handing over a whole day's wage just for him to look at, probably hoping that he didn't keep it. The children's story that went along with this passage actually talked about having the children's story reader go through the story and indicate things that weren't true. Like, for example, Jesus invited the people here, and the people who were there, the Pharisees and the Herodians, were encouraged by having ice cream together. It was not a thing that they wanted to do together. In fact, in trapping Jesus, they were hoping that this might be the end of his ministry. Well, in that challenge, he doesn't really go with one side or the other. In fact, he doesn't even disappoint them in a way. He really surprises them. Pay to Caesar what is Caesar's. Pay to God what is God's. How do we interpret that in our life today? Well, we pay taxes. In fact, in the midst of everything that's happening with the coronavirus, we know that tax deadlines have been extended. But paying taxes is an annual thing. We realize that and know that. But we also understand that there is something more to this story than just the regular, not just paying taxes. No, in this case, Jesus is saying and asking us to think about, what is it that we owe to God? Well, if we pay our taxes, as we are to as citizens of the country we live in, we then consider, what else do we owe to God? Well, we pay our tithes or offerings. We do gifts to various organizations. We think that's a godly act. We help people in need, whether it's through our food drive here at the church, the ways that we serve the church or the community, the ways that we serve other organizations throughout our denomination and throughout our community. But it's more than that. Jesus is really wanting us to think about what more can we do, and the overarching aspect that everything is God's. If we think about the creation story, we know that God created the heavens and the earth. God created all the living creatures, the waters, the seas. And we start to piece together all those aspects of the creation story, and we realize again, hopefully it's just a reminder, that everything is God's. We sometimes get into our own heads that we are in control. I think during this time of coronavirus, we know that we are definitely not in control. And so this is a time when we should most definitely be more stringent, stronger, closer in our faith. Probably not to each other with social distancing, but at least to identify how can we be stronger in our faith. Well, one of those aspects is recognizing that what we have, what we own, is not really ours. You know, you've heard the saying, you can't take it with you. It really doesn't make much sense to amass so many things, so much wealth in this life, because it's not going to do you any good in the next. Now, there is a positive thing that if you do amass enough riches in this life, that maybe you use it to do good for others. So not just to pay your taxes, but to continue to offer services, gifts, help to those in need. Because we're not all given the same. As life continues, we see that. From early childhood, you don't know the difference between what your neighbor might have and what someone else might have versus what you have. But as we grow up, we definitely know the difference. We see something that we want. We see someone has something that we really could use, but do we really need it? This is all to remind us that through this period especially, we often take for granted the things that are important to us. So spending time with family should be important. The ways that people survived the Western fires, fires in Australia, when they come together and you see a picture of them just as a family together, that's all they really needed. All those other things can be replaced. Yes, we wish we could have family photos back. Those who have gone through hurricanes or tornadoes have experienced loss of those cherished items. But in reality, those things that are really God's, us, continue to belong to God. So let's continue to dedicate our life to doing what God has called us to do. Our photo that we have used throughout the series continues to change. I hope you've noticed that, for those of you who have been in the last two services. And if you join us for the next few, I hope again that you check out the photo. There's a series that is emerging. There is a continued pattern of moving forward. That's what we all need to do. We start in this spot, we recognize what we are called to do, but we move forward. We do that with hope and faith in God. May that continue for you, knowing that, yes, taxes are going to still need to be paid, but that we ultimately belong to God. And in that, God continues to watch over us, cherish us, love us, no matter what. Amen. Each week throughout this series, we have encouraged folks here at church to take photos of artful life moments that are happening around you. So find an empty frame somewhere and take a photo. Submit it to our church Facebook page with the hashtag LifeFrame and hashtag Columbia City Church of the Brethren. Or you may email it to info@CCCoB.net. This season we're putting frames around a bit of life. We section off a scene. We look long into a face to see what we can see, to know what we can know. Just as we have done with the art and story today and throughout this series, zoom in your focus on the art and story of life throughout the week. The divine artist offers us such poignant beauty each day in our own stories, in the stories around us, in the heartbreak and the pain, the joy and the awe of a simple moment turned significant. That's what happens when we put a frame around it. We zoom in for an existential close-up and search for clues for living this life with more attention and intention. May you be blessed by the sacred frames that surround your moments of your life that you dare not miss. Amen.